Kulam ahovim, kulam berurim, kulam giburim, v'kulam osim be'mavir aratzon konam, v'kulam borchim et bihem, b'kdushav tahara, b'shira uvzimra, umvarachim u'meshavachim farim, umaritzim u'makdishim u'mamlichim, et shem ha'el ha'melech, ha'gadol gibor v'nora, kadosh hu. Kulam makablim aleihem, al malchut shemayim zemizeh, v'notnim reshut zelazeh, lakdish leotram menachat ruach, b'safa v'ruma v'nima, kedusha kulam, kecharonim v'yomrim be'ira, kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, milo kol haaretz kevodo. Ofanim v'chayot HaKodesh, berash gadol, mitnasim limatzrafim, liumatam, mishabachim v'yomrim, baruch kevod Adonai, mimkomo. Lel baruch nemot yiteinu, lemelch HaKav kayom. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkechu lanu meher aleoro, baruch ata Adonai, yotzer ha'meoro.
Amen.
Avarabav tanu Adonai Eloheinu, chem lagadol. As we
prepare ourselves for the Shema, we meditate on God's love.
V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu komemiut le'artzenu ki el poel yeshuotata uvanu v'acharta mikol am velashon v'keravtanu l'shimcha hagadol selah ve'emet lehodot lecha ulyachedcha be'ahava. Baruch ata Adonai, abocher b'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadivarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibartam v'shiftecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech u'v'shachpecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'einenecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha v'hayan shemot
Temera.
Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Lemor, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, v'yamata alehem, v'yasu lahem tzitzit, al kanfei bigdeihem ledoratam, v'natnu al tzitzit, hakanaf patil techelet, v'haya lachem letzitzit, Uritem oto, uzachartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, v'asitem otam, ve'lo taturu, acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם Adonai Elohechem
אמן ביציב ונכון בקיים וישר ונאמנו בחביב ונחמד ונעים ונורא וידיר ושכן ומקבל וטוב ויפה דבר הזה עלינו לעולם ועד
לדור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים פסיהו נכון ומלכותו אמונתו לעד קיימת
דבריו חיים וקיימים נאמנים ונכונים לעולמים אבותינו ועלינו אבותינו
אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו מלכנו מלך אבותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו יוצרנו צור ישועתנו פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם
מגנו משה לבניהם We feel God's presence through our ancestry, and we feel God's presence now.
Alzot, alzot, shibchu ahuvim, shibchu ahuvim, veromemu, 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 veromemu el, venatnu, venatnu yedidim, venatnu, venatnu yedidim, zmirot, shirot, vetishbachot, berachot, vehodaot, lemelech el chai v'kayam, Ram venisa, gadol venora, mashpil geim, umagbiach shefalim, motzi asirim ufode anavim, veyozer dalim. Veyon Eliamo, Veyon Eliamo, Beit Shavah Melav. Tilot Le'el Elyon, Baruch Barach, Moshe uvnei Yisrael, Lecha anu shira, b'simcha rabba, v'yamru chulam. Mi chamocha, ba'eli Adonai, mi kamocha, nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, osef eleh. Shira chadasha, shibchu geulim l'shemcha al sfat hayam. Yachad kulam hodu, v'himlichu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Tzur Yisrael, kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, uftechenu mecha, Yehuda ve'Yisrael. Go aleinu, Adonai tzvaot shemo, Kedosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
Friends, if you're davening, please continue. Page 115b for the repetition.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. El Agadol, Agibor Vanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Kone Hakol, Zocher Chastei Avot, Umevi Goel Ivnei Vnehem, Leman Shemo Biahava, Melech Ozer Fokedu Moshiach Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ufoket Sarah.
Amen.
Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye metim atah Rav leHoshia, Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechaye metim berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofech cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei afa. Micha mocha ba'al gevurot, umido melach, melach memit umechayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'ema nata l'chayot meitim, Baruch atah Adonai, mechayei hametim.
Amen. Page 116.
Kadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Geshem shmakti shimoto b'shmei marom, kakatuv al yad neviyecha, v'kara ze el ze v'yamah.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melech kol haaretz kivodo.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Melech kol haaretz kivodo. Az b'kol Rash Gadol, Adir v'chazak mashmi'im kol, Midnasim liumatzrafim, liumatam, Baruch yomeru.
Baruch kevod Adonai, mimekomo, mimkom chometaf yev d'malach, mataytim lach b'tzion, mikaro b'yameinu, tishkon.
Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. Mimkomecha malkeinu tofia, v'timloch aleinu, ki mechakim anachnu lach. Matai timloch b'tzion, bekarov b'yameinu, le'olam va'ed tishkon. Titkadal v'titkadash, betoch Yerushalayim ircha, ledor vador, ulenetzach netzachim, ve'yenenu tirena malchutecha akadavar hamur beshirei uzecha al yedei David Meshiach, al yedei David Meshiach tzidkecha, yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, ledor vador, hallelujah. Ledor vador nagid gadlecha, ulenetzach netzachim kiddushatcha nakdish, Shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed, ki hamelech gadol v'kadosh ata, Baruch ata Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Amen. You may be seated.
Smach Moshe b'matnat chelko, ki eved neman karata loho, kalil tiferet barosho natata, bi'amdu lefanecha al har Sinai, u'shnei luchot avanim harid biyado, v'chatuv bahem shmirat Shabbat, v'chein katuv b'toratecha. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam, be'mini u'bein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, ki sheshet yemim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz, u'v'yom ha-shvi'i shavat vayi nafash. V'lo natato Adonai Eloheinu g'yei haratzot, v'lo nichalto malkeinu l'avdei b'silim, v'gam b'nuchato li'ashkinu areilim, ki li'Yisrael amcha natata b'ahava, l'zera Yaakov asher bam b'charta. Amekadashei shvi'i, kulam yisabuhu b'tuvecha, v'hashvi'i ratzita bo v'kidashto, chemdat yamim achol karata, zecher l'ma'aseh bereshit. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu, ritzei b'mnuchatenu, kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkeinu b'toratecha, sabenu mituvecha, v'samchenu b'yeshuatecha, v'taher libenu, li'avdecha b'emet, v'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, be'ahava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha, v'yanuchu v'Yisrael, Mekadeshei Shemecha, Baruch ata Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'yamcha Yisrael tfilotam, v'ashevet avodah levir beitecha, tfilotam b'avat hakabel b'ratzon, u'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Techazenu eneinu b'shkol etzion b'rachamim, Baruch ata Adonai, ha'machazeh shechinato l'tzion.
Amen.
Modim
Modim אנחנו לך.
נודה לכם סיפרתי לתחם ואחינו בסביבי. הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך, המנחם כי לא תמו חסדיך, מעולם קיווינו לך. ועל כולם יברך רם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד, וכל החיים ידעוך סלע, והללו את שמך באמת, האל ישועתנו עזרתנו סלע, ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, ברכנו בבנך המשולשת, בתורה הכתובה על ידי משה עבדך, המורה מפי אהרון ובניו, כהנים עם קדושך כאמור. יברכך אדוני וישמרך.
כן יהי רצון.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך.
כן יהי רצון.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
כן יהי רצון.
שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחם עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך, ברכנו אבינו כולנו כי עד בכור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו. תורת חיים ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Amen. Kaddish Shalem.
יקרא וקרא שמי רבה.
אמן.
בעלמא דברכנו תבן לחמחותי, בחייכון ומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו,
אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ביום מעולמיה, יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ורומם ונעשה, ורדר ולב ולעול שמי דקודשה,
בריחו.
לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמא ויאמרו,
אמן.
תקבל צאנו וברכנו כל ישראל, קדם אבוני בשמיא ויאמרו,
אמן.
יהי שלום רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו,
אמן.
עושה שלום ממרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
Amen. Yasher Koach. Beautifully done. Friends, we continue now with our Torah service, and we have our scholar in residence, Jackie Honig, Reb Jackie from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies. She's a rabbinical student in her third year, and it's an honor and a privilege to have her here. She spoke beautifully last night. She'll be leading our Torah service, giving the sermon, and a lunch and learn after Kiddush. And so very excited to learn with Jackie. Page 139, Ein Kamocha.
Ein kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai ve'ein kema'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha bechol dor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam ba'ed Adonai oslem o yitein Adonai yivarech et damo v'shalom Av harachamim heitiva birtzoncha et Zion Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim Ki v'echad levad batachnu Melech el Ram benisa Adon olamim. We rise as the ark is opened in the middle of page 139. Kuma Adonai v'yaputzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udevar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael Master of the universe, praised be your name and your sovereignty as we stand before your Torah.
May your favor abide with your people Israel. May your redeeming power be revealed to them in your sanctuary. Bless us all with your light. With compassion accept our prayer. May it be your will to grant us long life, to grant us well-being, to count us among the righteous, and to guard us, our families, and all your people Israel with compassion. You nourish and you sustain all life. Adonai hamamlacha v'amid naseh lechol rosh romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'adom raglav kadosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu har kodesh ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Friends, you may be seated.
The Parsha this week begins the story of Yosef and his not-so-great relationship with his brothers. He tends the flock with his brothers and brings bad reports against them to his father Yaakov. Yaakov, called Yisrael here, loved Yosef best of all his sons. He gives him a beautiful coat, which we later come to translate as multicolored. While tending the fields with his brothers, Yosef tells his brothers 2 dreams that he had. In the first, they were binding sheaves in the field when all his brothers' sheaves bowed down to his. The second dream followed a similar theme. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars, presumably representing his 11 brothers, all bowed down to him. Clearly, Yosef had what his brothers considered to be delusions of grandeur. Spoilers, he was more right than they realized. Next up, the brothers plot to kill that dreamer, as they call him. Reuben intercedes, and they decide to throw him into a pit instead. While he is in the pit, Judah suggests they sell him to a wandering band of Ishmaelites. They tear his coat, they dip it in blood, and they bring it to their father, who believes that Joseph is dead, with good reason. The travelers sell Joseph to the Egyptians, and our story of Joseph takes a brief intermission. The Torah turns to Judah and his descendants. Judah marries and has 3 children. His oldest son, Er, marries Tamar, and then he dies. As was the custom of the time, through levirate marriage, Tamar then marries Judah's second oldest son, Onan. He too meets an early death, and Judah is reasonably hesitant to marry off his final son to her. Tamar is determined to have a child from the line of Judah, so she disguises herself as a harlot and seduces Judah. After some trials and tribulations and denial, Tamar gives birth to twins, Zerach and Peretz, who ultimately produces the line of David. Unpause, back to the Joseph story. Joseph is sold to Potiphar. Potiphar likes Joseph and appoints him to be the head of his household. Potiphar's wife is enthralled by Joseph and attempts to seduce him. He says no, and she reports him. Soon, Joseph finds himself in jail. While there, he meets the Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker. Lo and behold, they too have dreams. Conveniently for them, Joseph is able to interpret their dreams correctly, though with a slightly inconvenient outcome for the baker. The baker finds himself hanged, while the butler returns to his job. While it might seem like things are looking up for Joseph, this parsha gives us one final line to tell us that when he returns to his position, the cupbearer forgets about Joseph. It leaves us there to discover what happens to Joseph in next week's parsha.
So friends, we now begin our Torah reading, page 238 in our Eitz Chaim Chumash. We call up Jennifer Finger to read the first Aliyah. V'yazor, v'yagim v'yoshel chosmovan amar amen. Hakol, habu godel Eloheinu, nukavot Torah, ya'amod rishon, baruch shtan Elohim Yisrael, biktu shato. V'atem advekim b'nai Elohechem, chayim kochem hayom. You can get the, I have the thing in there, the blessings. Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'yosef u'ad Mitzrayma v'yakinehu Potiphar Shris Paro Shar HaTavachim Ish Mitzri Miyad Ishmaelim Asher Hoduhu Shama Vayehi Adonai Yosef Vayehi Ish Matzliach Vayehi Ve'ed Avadav HaMitzri Vayavadav Ki Adonai Oto V'chol Asher Hu Aseh Adonai Matzliach B'yado Vayimsa Yosef Chen B'nav V'sharet Oto V'yakidehu Abeto V'chol Yishlo Natan B'yado Vayehi miyaz Yifkidoto B'veito V'yachol Sher yesh lo Vayevarach Adonai Et Be'hamitzri B'gol Yosef Vayehi Birkat Adonai V'chol Sher yesh lo ובשדה, בבית ובשדה, ויעזוב כאשר לו ביד יוסף, ולא יאמר כי אם הלחם אשר הוא אוכל, ויהי יוסף יפה תואר ויפה מראה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Kochachem, our second Aliyah, page 239, verse 7.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarah.
Baruch Adonai Ambarach Olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Vayehi achar hadvarim ha'ele v'tisav eshet aranav et einea el Yosef v'tomer shichva imi v'yamein vayomer El eshet Adanav, hein Adonai, lo yada et ma babayit, v'chol asher yesh lo, v'chol asher yesh lo, natan bayadi, einenu gadol babayit, hazeh mimeni, v'lo chasech mimeni, me'uma ki im otach, ba'asher at Ishto ve'en e'eseh hara'ah hagedolah hazot v'chatati le'Elohim ve'yi kidabra el Yosef yom yom ve'lo shama aleha lishkav etzla liot ima.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher noten lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam v'notan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Kochachem. Thank you. Feels good to be here. Our third Aliyah begins on page 240, verse 11.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Ambarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayehi kayom hazeh, vayavo habayta la'asot melachto, ve'ein ish me'anshei habayit shaham babayit. Vayitpesehu bevigdo lemor shichva imi, vayazov bigdo biyadav, vayanos vayitzeh hachutza, vayehi kirotaha ki azav bigdo biyadav, vayanos hachutza, ותקרא לאנשי הבית, ותאמר להם לאמור, ראו, הביא לנו איש עברי לצחק בנו, בא אלי לשכב עמי, ואקרא בקול גדול, ויהי כשמעו, כי הרימי קולי, ואקרא, ויעזוב בגדו אצלי, וינוס ויצא החוצה. ותנח בגדו אצלה, עד בוא אדוניו אל ביתו. ותדבר אליו כדברים האלה לאמור, בוא אלי העבד העברי, אשר הבאת לנו לצחק בי, ויהי כהרימי קולי, ואקרא, ויעזוב בגדו אצלי, וינוס החוצה. ויהי כשמוע אדוניו את דברי אשתו, אשר דיברה אליו לאמור, כדברים האלה עשה לי עבדך, ואיחר אפו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Our fourth aliyah, Phyllis Kaufman will be reading. We can find it on page 241, verse 19. So nice to be back. Nice to be here.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן.
אמן. ויהי כשמח אדוני, ויהי כשמח אדוני את דברי אשתו, אשר דיברה אליו לאמור, כדברים האלה עשך לי עבדך, וייחר אפו, ויקרא אדוני יוסף אותו, ויתנהו אל בית הסוהר, מקום אשר אסירי המלך אסורים, וייחר שם בבוקר. ויהי שם בבית הסוהר, ויהי אדוני את יוסף, וית אליו חסד, ויתן הנו בעיני שר בית הסוהר, ויתן שר בית הסוהר בידו שר בית הסוהר ביד יוסף את כל האסירים אשר בבית הסוהר, ואת כל אשר עושים שם הוא היה עושה. אין שר בית הסוהר רואה את כל מהומה בידו, ואשר אדוני איתו, ואשר הוא עושה, אדוני מצליח.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת לחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Friends, the story continues on page 242, chapter 40, and we call up Gil to be our reader.
Baruch Hu es Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bacha banu mikol hamim v'nasan lanu es toraso. Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayhi achar hadbarim ha'eleh chatu mashke melech mitzrayim v'hafeh ladnohehem lemelech mitzrayim vayikso paro al shnei sarisav al sar hamashkim v'al Sar ha'ofim vayiten otam b'mishmar beit Sar ha'tabachim el beit ha'sohar mekoma shir Yosef asor sham vayivkod Sar ha'tabachim et Yosef itam v'yasharet otam vayiyu yamim b'mishmar Vayachal mu chalom shnehem ish chalamo belayla echad ish kifitron chalamo hamashkeha v'ha'ofi fe asher lemelech mitzrayim asher asurim beveit hasohar Vayavo alehem Yosef baboker vayar itam v'hinam zoafim vayishal et seresei faro asher ito b'mishmar Beit Adanav lemor madua pnechem ra'im hayom Vayomru elav chalom lamnu foter ein ito Vayomer alihem Yosef Halo Elohim Pitronim saprunali
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasan lanu Toras emes v'chayei olam nata b'sochenu Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen, amen. Yasher kochachem. Friends, we continue on page 243. We call up Mitch Lukin as our Torah reader. Continue on verse 9. Oh, we have a special aliyah this morning. Nancy and Richie Fried are coming for a special aliyah. Good to see you. Accompanied by grandchildren.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Baloney. Hello. Baloney, look. Look at me.
Amen. Vayasaper sar hamishkim et chalomo leYosef vayomer lo v'chalomiv hine gefen lefanai uvagefen shlosha sarigim v'hi chafo alata nitzah chiv shilu eshklotecha anavim v'chos faro b'yadi ve'ekach et ha'anavim va'eshchat otam el kos paro ve'etain et hakos al kaf paro vayomer lo Yosef ze pitrono shloshet hasarikim shloshet yamim hem be'od shloshet yamim Isa faro et roshecha v'hashivacha al kanecha v'natata chos paro b'yado kamishpat harishon asher hayata mashkehu ki im zachartani itcha kasher yitavlach va'asita na imadi chased v'hizkartani el paro v'hotzetani min habayit hazeh ki gunov gunavti meretz ha'ivrim v'gampo lo asiti me'uma ki shamu oti babor.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. So Nancy and Richie are celebrating a very special moment up on the bima, and how appropriate it is that they are here standing in front of the Torah, in front of this community, celebrating this beautiful moment. Let's invite the whole family up, if you don't mind. Please, the guys, come on up here. Yalla, 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 lilla, yalla, yalla, lilla, yalla, 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 lilla, yalla, yalla, lilla, yalla, 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 At moments like these, when we celebrate a moment in time, we can recite the Shechianu prayer. Please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen. Mishaberach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov. Sarah Rivka Leah. Uyivarech et hachatan Reuven ben Shlomo udvora v'et hakala Yetta bat Baruch Kohen v'Leah. Asher alu hayam lichvot hamakom v'lichvot haTorah. Hakadosh Baruch Hu yishmorotam et mishpachotam. Vishlach bracha v'atzlacha b'chol ma'aseidehem. Im kol Yisrael achehem v'nomar Amen. May God who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless Nancy and Richie, who are celebrating their 50th anniversary together. May God bless the work of their hands. May God bless their family and their friends and the entire Bris Shalom community, of which they are a centerpiece in our community. May God bring blessing over them and their entire family, bringing blessing and success to all their worthy endeavors, together with our fellow Jews everywhere. And let us say, Amen. Simin tov u'mazel tov u'mazel tov u'simin tov, simin tov u'mazel tov u'simin tov, simin tov u'mazel tov, mazel tov u'simin tov. Yehei lanu, yehei lanu, yehei lanu, u'lecho Yisrael. 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 Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elechem v'yasem lachem shalom. May God bless you and keep you. May God show you favor and be gracious to you. May God show you kindness and grant you peace and love. Ad mea ve'esrim until 120. And together we say, Amen, Amen. You may be seated. Mazel tov. Friends, we continue now with the 7th Aliyah. We bring up Eliezer to be our reader. Rabbi Dan Gordon receiving the Aliyah.
Baruch hu et Adonai Amvarach.
Baruch Adonai Amvarach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Amvarach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. וירא שר האופים כי טוב פתר, ויאמר אל יוסף, אף אני בחלומי, והנה 3 סלי חורי על ראשי, ובשר העליון מכל מאכל פרעה מעשה אופה, והעוף אוכל אותם מן הסל מעל ראשי. ויען יוסף ויאמר, זה פתרונו, 3 הסלים 3 ימים הם. בעוד 3 ימים יישא פרעה את ראשך מעליך ותלה אותך על עץ, ואכל העוף את בשרך מעליך. ויהי ביום השלישי יום הולדת את פרעה, ויעש משתה לכל עבדיו, ויישא את ראש שר המשקים ואת ראש שר האופים בתוך עבדיו, וישב את שר המשקים על משקהו, ויתן הכוס על כף פרעה, ואת שר האופים תלה, כאשר פתר להם יוסף, ולא זכר שר המשקים את יוסף, וישכחהו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yasher koach, yasher koach. Friends, let's make a mishaberach for the cholim, a prayer of healing for all those in need. If you have someone that you're praying for, I invite you to please rise, and we'll recite that name during the pause. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Sarai Yivkarach v'Avliah, v'Yivarech v'Yirapeh et kol hacholim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimel Rachim Alhem Lachzikam V'Rapotam Yishach Lem Mera Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shecholam HaYisrael Shabbat Yimil Zok Ufro Kolavo Hashta B'Zman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. Friends, we all rise יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא רק ירותי והמליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל. בעגלה, בעגלה, ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם בעולמי עולמיה. יתברך, יתברך, וישתבח, ויתפאר בתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר, ויתעלה, ויתהלל, שמי לקודשה פריחו לעילה, מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמא, ואמרו amen. May be seated. Ya'amod maftir. We call forward Jonas Actor virtually for the maftir aliyah.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Elohim melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ויהי ביום השלישי, יום הולדת את פרעה, ויעש משתה לכל עבדיו, ויישא את ראש שר המשקים ואת ראש שר האופים בתוך עבדיו, וישב את שר המשקים על משקהו, ויתן הכוס על כף פרעה, ואת שר האופים תלה, כאשר פטר להם יוסף, ולא זכר שר המשקים את יוסף, וישכחהו.
Baruch Adonai Elohim melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chayei olam tabdochenu. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach, yasher koach. Ya'amdu hamagbiya v'hagolel. We rise as the Torah is lifted. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba tomchei ha'meushar. Eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomchei ha'meushar. Teracheha darchei noam v'chol netivotei hashalom. Teracheha darchei noam v'chol netivotei hashalom. Yai lai lai, yalai lai lai, yalali lai lai lai. Yalla la la la, yalla la, yalla la la, yalla la la la, yalla 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 la. You may be seated. The Haftarah can be found from Amos, page 247, preceded by the brachot.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nviim tovim, v'ratzav divreihem nemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'torah u'Moshe abdohu, u'Yisrael hamohu, u'b'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Am Adonai Hoshlosha Tisheh Yisrael Al Arba'at Lo Ashivenu Al Mithram B'Kesef Tzadik Be'evyon B'Avor Nalayim Hashoavim Al Afer Eretz Be'rosh Talim Be'derech Hanavim Yadu Be'ishvavim Ilful Hanara, Manchale, Champochi, Kabgadim, Kabulim Yatu, Etzel, Kol Mizbeach, Beyin Anushim Yishtubet, Elohim, Anochi, Ishmat Yetemur Pipnehem, Asher Kigova Arazim Goho, Bechason Hu Kalonim, Bashnir Yom Ab Sharashav Mitafat, Anochi, Eliti Etfem, Eretz Mitzrayim, Golech Etfem Bamidbar, Arba'im Shana, Lahareshet Eretz Emori, Bakim Bimnechem Linviim, Mibachurechem Linzirim, Ha'afin Zot, Ne Yisrael, Neum Adonai, Batashkur Hanzirim Yahayin, Bahanvihim Tzivitehem Lehor, Lo Tinavu, Anochi Me'ik Tachtichem, Kasher Ta'ik Hagalaha, Amle Ahala Amir, Babad Manos Mikav B'chazak, Lo Yamitz Kocho, Begibor Limalit Nafsho, Betofes Akeshet, Lo Yamor, Bekabra Glav, Lo Yimalet, Rofe Hasus, Lo Yimalet Nafsho, Bamitzlibo, Bagiborim, Arom, Yanus Vayamahu, Neum Adonai, Shim'ud Dafarazeh, Asher Diber Adonai, Alechem B'nei Yisrael, Ahok L'mishpacha, Asher Helehiti, Meretz Mitzrayim Lemor, Rak Etchem Yadati, Miko Mishpachot Hadamah, Al Kehenef Kohot Alechem, Et Klavonotechem, Ayafushenayim Yakav, Bilti Im Noadu, Ayishagar Yebayar, Beteref in Loho, Ayitehen Kvir Polo, Imo Nato, Bilti Im Lachar, Hatipot Zipor Abacharetz, Mokesh in Laha, Aylepach min Ha'arapaha, Belachor Boyokor, Imdaka Shofar Be'ir, Be'aham Loicheradu, Imtiera Be'ir Badonai, Lo Asaha, Ki Lo Yaseh, Adonai Elohim Davar, Ki Im Galah Soto, El Abadav Hanvim, Ar Yeshag Milo Yiraha, Adonai Elohim Diber, Mihi Lo Yinaveh, Baruch Adonai Elohim Melech Tzur Kol Amim Tzidbut Kol Darot, Kalan Eman Ha'amer Vosem Deber Mekayim, Shekol Devarav Emet Batzedek, Ne'eman Atahu Adonai Eloheinu, Ne'emanim Devaracha, K'barchanim Devaracha, Achor Liyashuv Rekam, Ki Amalach Ne'eman Verchaman Ata, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el Ne'eman Chod Varahav, Rachem Al Tzion Ki Bet Chaynu, Vel Aluvat Nevesh Toshia B'mirav Yaminu, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mesamech Tzion Vaneha, Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu B'Yohana B'Avdacha, B'Moklo B'David M'Shichacha, B'Mirayavo V'Yagel Libenu, Al Kiso Lo Yeshev Zar B'Lo N'Chaluot Afrim Et Kvodaho, Ki V'Shem Kodshcha Nishbata Lo Shlech Menero L'Olam Va'ed, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen David, Al Torah, B'Avodah, B'Nevi'im, B'Yom Shabbat Hazeh, Shnatata Lanu Adonai Eloheinu L'Kedushav L'Nucha, L'Chavod U'Tifaret, Al Kol Adonai Eloheinu Nachnu Modim Lach, U'Mevarachim Otach, Yitbarach Shemcha B'Fi Kol Chai Tamid L'Olam Va'ed, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen, amen. Yashar Koach, virtually. Nice to see you here in Shul, and glad we could make it work. So friends, we turn to page 150. We rise as the Torah rises. On page 150, we're going to announce the new month ahead. Hanukkah comes at the end of Kislev, and so it bleeds into Tevet. May it be your will, Adonai our God and God of our ancestors, to reawaken in us joy and blessing in the month ahead. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Shetchadesh aleinu et hachodesh hazeh letova b'livracha, Vatiten lanu chayim arukim, chayim shel shalom, chayim shel tova, chayim shel bracha, chayim shel parnasa, chayim shel chilutz atzamot, chayim sheyesh bahem yirat shamayim v'yirat chet, chayim shein bahem busha uchlima, chayim shel osher v'chavod, chayim shetehei banu ahavat Torah v'yirat shamayim, chayim shemalu mishalot libeinu letova, amen selah. Mi she'asa nisim lavoteinu v'galotam avtu l'cherut, hu yigal otanu b'karo v'kabetz yidachenu merbakanfot haaretz, Chaverim kol Yisrael v'nomar amen. Rosh Chodesh Tevet yeh b'yom Shabbat Kodesh u'lemachrato yom harishon haba aleinu al kol Yisrael letova. Rosh Chodesh Tevet yeh b'yom Shabbat u'lemachrato yom harishon haba aleinu al kol Yisrael letova. The new month of Tevet will begin on Shabbat and continue till Sunday. May it hold blessing for us and for all God's people and all the world. Ichad shehu HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael l'chaim u'shalom l'sason u'l'simcha l'yeshua u'nechema v'nomar amen. May the Holy One bless this month of Tevet for us and for all God's people, the house of Israel, and for all the world, with life and peace, joy and gladness, deliverance and consolation. And together we say, Amen. Page 153. Hallelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado, hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren leyamo, tila lecho chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kirovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Mizmor leDavid,
havu ladonai b'nei elim, havu ladonai kavod va'oz, havu ladonai kivod shemo, ishtachavu ladonai behadrat kodesh.
Kol Adonai el hamayim, hel hakavod hirim, Adonai el mayim rabim.
Kol Adonai ba'koach,
Kol Adonai behazar,
Kol Adonai shover arazim, vayishaber Adonai et arzei halvanon.
Vayarkidem kemo hegel, Lebanon v'Sirion, kemo v'nreimim.
Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yecholel ayalot.
V'chasov yarot v'heichalo, kulo meher kavod.
Adonai lamabu yashav vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai os le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom.
Uvnucho yomar.
Shuvah.
It's Chaim hi, Lamach
מחזיקים בה
ותומכיה
מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם בכל נתיבותיה שלום השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם. Yalai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Ya la 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 ya la la la. Toda rabba. Page 155. Yitkada vitkada shemei rabba ve'alma divra kirute ve'amlich malchute v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Bagala ubisman kari v'imeru amen. Yeshmei rabba mevorach le'olam be'yom me'omaya Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitbar v'traman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'alma v'imeru amen. Page 156b. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim B'konei Hakol Mizocher Chasdei Avot Umevi Goel Livnei V'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer Ufoked Umoshia Umagen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai Mechayim Metim Atarav Lehoshia Mashiv HaRuach Umorid HaGashem Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Mechayim Metim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Ba'al Gevurot Domelach Melech Meimit Umechayeh Umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman atah l'chayot meitim Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh ha'meitim. La 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 la. Yambala lilai lai, alla lilai lai, ila lilai, alila lilai lai. Naritzecha benakdishecha, kesotziach sarfei kodesh. Shamakdishim shimcha bakodesh, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם, משרתיו שואלים זה לזה. איה מקום כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים באהבה שמע אומרים שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו, ישמיענו ברחמיו, שנית, 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 שנית לעיני כל. להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי אל ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך ולנצח, נצח עם קדושתך נקדיש, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך ולנצח, נצח עם קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. יללי עלי לי, איי עלי לי, עלי לי 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 ביי עלי לי. Ay la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Friends, if you're davening, please continue. We turn to page 159, where you can find Yismechu. We celebrate God's glory on this Shabbat, and we call it a delight. Yismechu b'malechutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreh, oneg Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreh, oneg Shabbat. Mikadeshei, Mikadeshei Shibi Shabbat, Kulam Yisbeu V'tangu Mituvecha Shabbat, Yismechu B'malechutecha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreh, oneg Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreh, oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi'i ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Chemdat yamim oto karata, zecher lema'aseh bereshit Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreh, oneg Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'koreh, oneg Shabbat. Page 181, Kaddish Shalem. Yitgadav, Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Divra Kirutei V'mlich Malchutei, V'chayechon V'mechon V'chayechol Beit Yisrael, Bagala V'zman Kariv V'imeru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, Le'olam Ve'ol Me'omaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach V'yishtabach Yitbar B'Shemam V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yitalav Shmei Dekudesha, Brichu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imeru, Amen. Titkabel tzadhanavat chol Yisrael, kadam avuhon v'ishmaya v'imeru, Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imeru, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru, Amen. We are blessed to have among us a rabbinical student who taught us last night, is teaching us today. What a joy and a pleasure and a privilege to invite Jackie Honig to our bima.
My mom is terrible at watching movies. She has trouble keeping the characters straight, particularly when they look alike, and definitely when it's hard to tell who the good guys and who the bad guys are. A number of years ago, I made it my mission to get her to watch at least one of the Star Wars movies, if not all of them. I tried to explain that it's easy to tell who the good guys and who the bad guys are. It's an archetypal good versus evil film. Big, black, wearing some scary armor, bad guy. Handsome, dashing, a woman, cute and furry, the good guys. She could handle it. And then I told her one more thing. Listen to the music. John Williams' score for the original Star Wars trilogy is truly a masterpiece. The musical arcs follow individual characters and also easily distinguish the good guys from the bad guys. Do, 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 do. Good guys. Do, 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 doom, ba-doom, bad bad guys. When a familiar face walks onto the screen, we hear their theme, and when a new face shows up, the score hints at who they are. Foreshadowing happens all the time in great books and movies. We feel the hair on the back of our neck stand up. We feel the sinking in our guts. We find ourselves holding our breath. We know something is coming. And believe it or not, Torah does this too. While the music isn't quite as foreboding, Torah gives us textual hints to warn us of what is about to happen. Midrash Tanchuma, an ancient Babylonian book of sermons on the Parshiot, speaks about the opening of this week's Parsha, beginning with the very first word, Vayeshav. Kol makom shehu omer Vayeshav, lashon sarhu. In every place that it says Vayeshav, and he sat or he dwelt, this is the language of suffering, tsuris. This is followed by 5 examples in the text where someone sits or dwells and bad things immediately follow. One of them even comes from this week's Parsha. Vayishvu le'achol lechem, vayisu einehem vayiru. They sat to eat their bread, and they raised their eyes, and they saw, behold, there was a band of Ishmaelites coming from Gilad. The Torah here is using this word, Vayeshav, according to the Midrash, to do some foreshadowing for us. They sat down, they raised their eyes, and bad things happened. What happened in this case? This is the moment when the brothers decide to sell Yosef into slavery. Not such good news for Yosef, and as we'll see a little later, it ends up being pretty bad news for the people overall. So the Midrash is positing that this Vayeshev, at the very beginning of our Parsha, the very opening line, portrays an aura of foreboding. Next comes the possibly obvious question. What is it foreshadowing? Good question. Good thing we have lots of sources to give us plenty of answers, because why have one answer when you can have 4? To find some answers, we're going to take a look at the next pasuk that begins, Eila toldot Yaakov. These are the generations of Yaakov. Yosef was 17 years old. He was shepherding the flocks with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, the wives of his father, and he brought bad reports to his father. There's definitely a lot here, and I want to focus just on the beginning of this verse. Eila toldot Yaakov Yosef, ben shva esrei shana haya. These are the generations of Yaakov, Yosef. He was 17 years old. While the ancient text doesn't have punctuation the way that we do, it has the trope, the cantillation marks, that can often help us break down a pasuk. In this case, it gives us 3 phrases. These are the generations of Yaakov. Then Yosef on its own has a distinct trope mark. And then he was 17 years old, has a series of tropes that all go together. This leaves the word Yosef sort of ambiguous. Does it go with what comes before it or what comes after it? Let's start with Rashi. Rashi, the 11th century French commentator on Torah, often brings, or at least he claims to bring, the simple meaning of the text, the pshat. For our verse, he adds a word to clarify. Ve'ela shel toldot Yaakov. These are of the generations of Yaakov. He continues, these are their dwellings and the events that happened until they came to settle down. The first thought is Yosef was 17. Because of him, all these things happened and they went down to Egypt. Rashi attempts to take the seemingly simplest explanation to a not so simple question here. He tells us that Yosef is listed first, even though he's not the oldest son, because everything that comes next, up to and including Bnei Israel settling in Egypt, is because of Yosef. So that's some big foreshadowing there. Everything that we know comes later, lots of bad things for our people, come from right at this moment, Yosef. We'll come back to this, but let's see what a few other medieval commentators have to say about it. In a slight twist of the usual, Ibn Ezra, a contemporary who sometimes disagrees with Rashi, takes a simpler but even shorter approach. He says, and the reason for these are the generations of Yaakov is that these are the events that happened to him. Ibn Ezra here comes out with an even simpler explanation than Rashi. He connects Yosef's name to the next phrase about his age and takes a short, simple, and straightforward interpretation of the text. These are the things that happened to Yaakov. Nothing to do with Joseph. Still a bit of foreshadowing that something is going to happen, but he doesn't seem to take a stand on whether it's bad or good, and he definitely has nothing to say about Yosef. Rashbam, one of Rashi's grandsons, has quite a bit to say on this topic. He opens by telling us what he definitely doesn't believe, while giving yet another explanation of what it could be. Ela hamikraot vehameorot she'iru leYaakov, v'hinei zeh havelhu. These are the generations of Yaakov. Oop, nope, that's the last page. I even numbered them this week. These are the events that happened to Yaakov. And this is ridiculous, Havel. Since in every place that this expression, these are the generations, is used in Torah and in the writings, there's an explanation of someone's children. And in many places, there is an explanation of their grandchildren, like I already explained about these are the generations of Noach. Well, Rashbam, why don't you just tell us how you really feel? He then goes on to explain what happened earlier in Torah with Noah and his generations, but then he finds himself back at Yaakov and Yosef. And now Torah writes, these are the generations of Yaakov, his children and his grandchildren, all 70 of them, and how they were born to him. How Yosef was 17, and these things happened so that Yosef went down to Egypt. And there, Manasseh and Ephraim were born, and he sent for his father and his father's house until they were 70 people. And all of this Moshe Rabbeinu needed to write, since this is the evidence for later when Torah says, with 70 souls, your father went down to Egypt. Rashbam brings together nicely what Rashi and Ibn Ezra have already told us. He brings in Ibn Ezra's idea that this is literal. We're talking about the literal children and grandchildren. And he speaks to Rashi's point that this is about what comes next. The descent of Yaakov and the people to Egypt. 3 medieval scholars, 3 opinions. Where does this leave us? Well, I'd say with more questions than answers, and definitely no consensus. I've got one more answer, though, to help tip the scales. Ramban, or Nachmanides if you prefer, tells us this on our verse. These are the generations of Yaakov, Yosef, and his brothers. That will be told to us later. The Torah seizes the opportunity to use a shorter method of names since they're noted above, but it says, these are the generations of Yaakov, Yosef, and his brothers, and this is what will happen to them. And it's possible that this word these, Elah, notes all that will happen in this book. 70 souls went down with your father to Egypt. Ramban stakes his claim on both sides. There is a literal physical accounting of the generations that happens, though not right here in the Torah. And this is connecting us to what is going to come. Yaakov and his family is going to go down to Egypt. Putting these all together, we've got something worth foreshadowing. Real bad things. This begins the story of Yaakov and Yosef and what comes next for them. This begins the descent of the Jews into Egypt and the beginning of slavery. We don't get that story this week, but we know where it leads. There's a whole holiday about it, which also is not the one coming this week. Like good literature or a good movie, Torah foreshadows things for us. It knows what's coming, and it builds up to it. We may not hear the empire theme when Pharaoh shows up, as fun as that might be, but when we read closely, especially with the help of the Midrash and the commentators, we may find something unexpected. Looking at Torah, like literature or film, might feel foreign or heretical. It is our holy book, after all. But when we use the resources available to us to look at our ancient text, we bring new life and we connect ourselves in different ways. We can help bring it into our lives in a way that feels close to us, like a favorite movie, something that we look forward to reading, analyzing, and returning to every year because we have a deep love for it. And I'm pretty sure that as long as we don't try to chant the Torah reading to the Star Wars theme, we'll be steering clear of real heresy. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Yasher Kochech. And there will also be a Lunch and Learn learning. Give us a foreshadowing of the Lunch and Learn topic.
So tomorrow night, as you might have heard, starts Hanukkah. And the Gemara asks this question, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah? And it's something that I definitely thought I knew the answer to, and it turns out I don't. And so we'll play a little bit and see what is Hanukkah really.
Good, and tell us about that talit.
I made this talit actually when I was living in Texas, somewhere on here. Let's see. Somewhere is a cactus for the state of Texas, I promise. Oh, there it is. There's a cactus. It's all sorts of different things that were meaningful to me in that moment in my life. And there's also a Millennium Falcon somewhere. Star Wars is kind of my jam.
There you go. Beautiful. Thank you. Looking forward to learning with you in a little bit. Page 182, we're going to conclude with Enkeloheinu and Aleinu, page 182. Enkeloheinu, Enkadonenu, Enkemalkeinu, Enkemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shiktiru, Avotenu, Lepanechat Ketores Hasamim, Yalla, Yalilayla, Yalayla, Yalayla, Yalla, Yalilayla, Yalayla, we rise, Yalla, Yalilayla, Yalayla, Yalayla, Yalla, Yalilayla, Yalayla. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, lated gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishbechot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vigor aleinu kecho hamonam, va'anachnu korim, Umishtahabim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu note shamai ve'osed haaretz umoshav yikaro bashamayim ima'al ushchinatu zo begavhei meromim Hu Eloheinu Enod, Emet Malkeinu Efesulato, Kakatu Betorato, Biadata Hayom Behashevota, Elebabecha, Ki Adonai Hua Elohim, Bashamayim Imal, V'al haaretz, mitachat, enod. Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai imloch le'olam ba'ed, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad, u'shemo Echad. May be seated. Our condolences go out to the families of Miles Cohn, Michael Ginsberg, Fred Levine, and Alex Knockenberg. We commemorate the following Yortzites: Ruth Brown, Annie Bloom Buck, Aaron Cohen, Gerald Epstein, Sadie Mae Garsick, Jerry Epstein, Saul Gelman, Esther Goldberg, Minnie Golub, Avraham Iskowitz, Louis Karf, Sarah Coram, Karen Goldsmith-Levy, Nat Levy, Jerome Maris, Harry Nadell, Lawrence Paul, Joe Ratner, Yitzhak Rouhani, David Schlachter, Stephen Schwartz, Rabbi Jerome Sherman, Sigmund Strauss, Edward Weidman, Zelda Kaplan-Wiener, and Sarah Zlotnick. Friends, Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 184. Yit Gadal ve'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alma Divra Kirute Ve'amlich Malchute V'chaye Echon V'yom Echon V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'gala U'bizman Kariv Imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Elamei Almaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitba'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Dekodesha Brichu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbachata V'nechamata Da'amiran Be'alma V'imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Ose Shalom Bimromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. May the one who makes peace above bring peace and comfort and consolation to us below. And together we say, Amen, Amen. Mr. President, how are you? Shabbat Shalom.
Ooh, this is fancy. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Jonah Paransky, and I'm the president of Bri Shalom. It's fantastic to see everyone here today with us, celebrating Shabbat both in person and online. A hearty yasher koach to all of our daveners, Torah readers, Gabaim, and our Gazumbai today. Thank you so much. It is fantastic to see Rabbi Teller back on the bima with us today, coming back from leave, and so great to see you, Rabbi. And also a special yasher koach to our rabbinic intern, Jackie Honig. Thank you so much, Jackie, for participating in our Shabbat services this weekend. It's great to have you here with us. A number of upcoming events coming up. We have a lot going on. First of all, our weekly morning minyan continues on Sundays through Fridays at 9 a.m. on Zoom, so we're continuing in that format for now. Please join us. We have our CBS Zoom at noon, Are There Jewish Angels, presented by Nancy Pikus. The final class is this Tuesday. Please see the Boker Tov for Zoom info. We have two special Hanukkah events coming up to bookend Hanukkah. We have tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. for the first night of Hanukkah, and again Sunday, December 5th for the last night. We have an online Zoom experience where we will be lighting menorahs together and singing songs, so please join us if you so desire. Also, in the middle of the week, we have an outdoor Hanukkah dinner and celebration on Wednesday, December 1st at 6 p.m. in the CBS parking lot. For that one, so that we have the right amount of food for everyone, please register in advance. Information on that is in the Boker Tov. But we're having really nice turnout so far, and would love to have you join us for a CBS outdoor Hanukkah celebration. And at least as of right now, the weather looks like it's going to cooperate with us, which is great. On the adult ed side, we have Red, White, and Jew, American Jewish Civilization with Kenner Levine, resumes on Thursday, December 2nd. And that'll be on Zoom. Information in the Boker Tov, so please check that out and continue that series with us. Let's talk about Kiddush today for a second. I want to thank our Kiddush sponsor, Shelley Rappaport, as well as co-sponsors Nancy and Richie Fried. Due to the weather, we're having to adjust our plan a little bit. We were going to have a fantastic outdoor Kiddush. The challenge is it's raining. It held out till about 15 minutes ago, and it is not participating with us the way we wanted. So what we've done is we've packed up Kiddush into to-go boxes for everyone so that you can enjoy a Kiddush experience, either right after services, outside, under cover, hang out, stand, eat, schmooze. right under the other undercovered area, or take it with you. And then, as we said earlier, we're having a lunch and learn. So for those who would like to stay for the lunch and learn, spend 10 minutes getting a nosh kind of undercover outside, and then come back and join us to lunch and learn. We're not yet at the point where we've opened up shul for indoor community eating, although that time may be coming here soon. And so lastly, as it relates to COVID and our COVID protocols, as all of you know, the situation as it relates to COVID in Harris County in particular has gotten quite a bit better. And so we've started the process of working with our reopening teams to look at what it means to go into the next phase of our potential COVID environment reopening. Not there yet, but we'll communicate with the shul as we see that data continue to evolve on what our next steps may be as it relates to our COVID protocols for Shabbat morning and Friday nights inside the sanctuary. And so more updates to come there as we know more, but the data has gotten significantly better in Harris County, with both Harris County moving to a level 3 threat level and the CDC moving Harris County to a moderate transmission level, which changes some of the scientific guidance around what those who are vaccinated can or can't do. We're not making any changes to our guidance around our expectation, as we talked about months ago, and as supported by the Synagogue Board of Trustees, that if you are medically eligible to vaccinate, we expect you to do so, to join us here in person, or otherwise join us remote. Obviously, that guidance is somewhat different to those 11 and under, who are just now being able to go through the vaccination process. And with that, Shabbat Shalom. Thanks so much.
Shabbat Shalom. Janice. Janice always has something up her sleeve, and we'll see what happens. Adon Olam, page 187.
Was our wonderful scholar, Reb Jackie, reminded us today, Hanukkah starts tomorrow night, so perhaps we could do Adon Olam to the tune of Ma'ot Sur. Adon Olam asher malach v'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yihabet yifara v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yihabet yifara v'hu echad li'en sheni l'hamshilo v'habira v'li reshit v'li tachlit v'lo ha'os v'hamisra v'hu eli v'chai go'ali v'tzur chavli v'etzara v'hu nisi umanos li manat kosi v'yom ekra v'hu nisi umanos li manat kosi v'yom ekra v'yagdo afkid ruchi v'etisha v'ahira v'him ruchi geviati Adonai li v'lo ira v'etachin matbeach mitzar hamnabeach azegmor b'shir mizmor Hanukkah mizbeach ve'azegmor b'shir mizmor Hanukkah mizbeach.
Yasher kochech. We rise for Kiddush. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן ברכנו את שם השבת ויקדשהו סברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. A little bit of water. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher קידשנו אותנו על נטילת ידיים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Friends, it's so wonderful to be here this morning and to hear the sounds of all the voices. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lachem shalom. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. Friends, stick around to learn about Hanukkah and intensify.
Yeah. Hugging mask.